Welcome back, fellow cardboarders. We're gonna start today's video with a small little mail time, which is related to the second segment of this video, where I explain everything about the format Dandân that you need to know. Without further ado, let's begin our cardboard haul. There are two letters I want to dig in, so let's see what we got in our first one here. I think I need a knife for this one to be opened with all the sellotape going all around the cards. Yeah, here we are. So you can already see one of the cards. A wonderful spell blast from Unlimited. Very nice. Oh man, yeah, that is nice. It has some fingerprints here. I think I can just wipe it off. Yeah, so that's a nice lightly played card. Has a little nick up here, a little scratch here, but all in all really nice. The Spell Blast, by the way, will be for a future Unlimited set cube. My mother-in-law gave me the idea to also build the very first set that came out in Magic the Gathering when I showed her the game during the holidays. And obviously I'm not gonna start an Alpha or Beta cube, but Unlimited, which still has the same cards in it as the first sets. This set seems to be a set that is collectible and doesn't completely destroy your wallet, even though they are expensive. Now, the actual reason of this video is this fish here. So let's see. Yeah, I ordered two, and this one, really nice. Yeah, that's nice condition. Has a little pressure mark there, but all in all lightly played. Little surface usage, I guess, but all in all looks nice. Little scratch here. Yeah, that one is nice. Okay. And I will tell you why I'm getting these fish in a moment, so just bear with me. This one is for my set cube. I'm still missing one or two of these, so I got those out of the way now. And Venerian Gold, I think I'm also still missing another one for my Legends set cube. And lastly, an Energy Flux for my Antiquities set cube. Now that one is crisp. If you are interested in my Antiquities set cube, I have a link up here. Has a little scratch here and there, but other than that it's really nice condition. Very nice. I'm not sure about what's in here. I don't think I ordered more, so this one, yeah, let's just bulk to protect the order, I suppose. Yeah, pretty tokens. Oh, that goat is nice. That's a cute goat. Stealing a shoe. Let's hit into the second letter before we talk about the fish. So let's see what we got here. Oh, nice. More Arabian Nights cards. A giant tortoise. Always keep in mind that there are two printings of most of the cards in the set. So there's a darker printing where the colorless mana symbol is darker. So this is one of these. I think... Oh, this one I just ordered because I still had €1 to fill the order with. Some rifle shuffle marks, ouch. So nothing too exciting. But yeah, this one I wanted to talk about. Nice. So this is actually one of the more expensive variants with the mana costs that are in the classic light gray version. And when you compare those to each other, you see that this one has a darker circle around the 1, and this one has the lighter circle around the 3. I'm not entirely sure if I want to only have the darker or the lighter printing of each of those cards, but I think I want to actually have one of each variant at least in my set cube. So I'm glad I have this one out of the way. I still need one of the lighter versions of the tortoise. And lastly, this should be, yes, another Dandân. Very nice. Ooh, that is also crisp. Wow. Very nice condition. So now this is the second part of the video where we talk about the format of Dandân.
Dun 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 dun.
Which will probably be a recurring sub-segment for another couple of more episodes. And today's video will focus on what the format Dandân is and how it's played. So let's put the cards we actually do not need out of the way, which is actually everything except for the fish. So let's put those out of the way and get some more cards in, which I already put aside. This little stack here. So Dandân is a 2-player format where you have one 80 card deck that revolves around the creature Dandân. You and your opponent both share the same library. At the beginning of the game, you both draw 7 cards. The mulligan rules are if you have 0, 1, 6 or 7 lands, you get a free mulligan. Otherwise, you have the normal mulligan rules of drawing 1 less, or rather drawing 7, and for each mulligan you put 1 under the library as soon as you want to hold the new hand. There are 10 of the Dandans in the deck and a whole bunch of interaction, which is where the fun actually starts. If you know the game Exploding Kittens, which started out I think as a mobile game and now has a whole card game as well, I think this is the closest that Magic the Gathering can get to becoming this game. So bear with me and see how this deck works. And what I'm showing you here is all the cards I already have, and I still need a couple more, so I will also put some cards on screen so you also see what the rest of the deck looks like. So I need 10 Dandans, which means we get more Dandans over the next couple of weeks. And then we have a couple of cards here, like Predict, which allows you to name a card which is probably, maybe, on top of the library, of the shared library. And there are a couple of cards that can manipulate the top of the library, for example, like a Brainstorm, which we will see in a second. And if you are right, you reveal it, you draw 2 cards. Also, you put the top card into the graveyard, so you don't even get it. If you're wrong, which is also fine, you just draw 1 card. This card is in here twice. We also have Mental Note, which mills 2 cards of the shared library, and then you draw 1 card. Then we have Metamorphose, which puts a permanent on top of its owner's library. So in this case, Dandân. Since this will be the only creature in this whole deck, and you try to beat each other up with this fish, or not if you can. So there are different ways of winning, for example by decking your opponent out, so him being the one who has to draw a card. But yeah, with this one you can put the fish on top of the library and then hopefully draw it, and your opponent is able, after the spell, to put a permanent card onto the battlefield. This card is in here twice. I only have 1 of these. This Mystic Retrieval allows you to get an instant or sorcery card back into your hand, and has flashback with a red mana, which is why there are, I think, 4 lands that produce red mana, a red mana source. And everyone can use it, which means you use it and then your opponent could use it in a later turn if you don't have the red mana for it. Now this one is a really interesting card. If you haven't read Dandân yet, now is the moment. So Dandân has something which is called Island Home in 5th edition, but it never really took off. So cards like this don't exist anymore, they are not produced. He can't attack unless your opponent has islands, which is most of the time. He will have an island, and he actually dies if you don't control any islands. And Vision Charm allows you to do just that. Manipulate all the basic lands of one type. So With Vision Charm and your opponent having 1 or 2 Dandans out, you can actually wipe the board, since Dandan is the only creature on the board and in the deck in its entirety. And now you can turn, for example, all the islands into forests, and, well, Dandan can't live in a forest and all of the Dandans die. You can also mill with this card, so more of a fringe move, I guess. But yeah, that's also a possibility, and I think we have 2 in this deck. Right. We have Telling Time, which allows you to manipulate the top 3 cards, as I already teased that there are more of these cards in the deck. We should have 4 in this. I only found 1 English copy, so I need 3 more. We have Ray of Command, which allows you to take control over a Dandan at instant speed. And he even gains haste, so that's a really unique ability in blue. Normally that is the red part of the color pie that normally does that, but here we have a blue spell, a very old one that does that. Let's put those a little further away, since we will not talk about those anymore today. We have 2 of the Array of Command here. Then we have Miscalculation, which allows you to counter a spell unless its controller pays 2, and it also has Cycling, and Cycling is very important. You can use it as an instant. So for example, someone puts a Dandan on top of the library and wants to draw it. Next turn, you can react during the draw step and draw it instead, and then the opponent has to draw the next card that is on top. Or whatever is on top of the library. You can just draw through the cycling ability, but keep in mind your opponent can also cycle or use any of the instants that draw cards as well. And I think 1 of this one is in there. There's also 1 foil, which allows you to discard an island card instead of paying the mana cost, or you pay 4 if you don't have one in your hand, to just hard counter a spell, any of the spells. So that's a really strong card in this deck. Another wonderful card is Accumulated Knowledge. There are actually 4 copies of this card in this deck, which allows you to draw 1 card if there are no Accumulated Knowledge cards in the graveyard, and then 1 extra card per Accumulated Knowledge that is in the graveyard. So if you play the second one, you actually draw 2 cards, and so on. So for just 2 mana, if 3 of the Accumulated Knowledges were already played, you can draw actually 4 cards. So that's quite useful late game. Let's put those somewhere here. And look at Portent. This is only sorcery speed and allows you to look at the top 3 cards, and you can choose to shuffle the cards or put them back in any order, and during the upkeep of the next player's turn you draw a card. And this is what I mean, these shenanigans that allow you to manipulate and counter and put on top different cards is where I think the spiciness of this format really shines. This format really plays a lot with the stack as well, so it's also, I think, a great way to learn how to play with blue and how to use the stack and when to play a counter and when to interact. So this is, in my eyes, a really fun format for just an in-between game when you have to wait for friends, or you're in a train and you don't want to pack out your thousands of dollars commander deck, or you just don't have the space but you would have the space for 1 deck, and you can just play a round of Dandan. Already said Brainstorm is a part of this deck. By the way, Portent we have 2 copies in. With Brainstorm we also have 2 copies. Allows you to draw 3 cards and then put any 2 cards from your hand back. So you could just put back trash for your opponent to draw. And then I am at the lands, I think. Yeah. So there are a couple of cards which I am still missing before I talk about the lands. There is Diminishing Returns, which is a sorcery for 4 mana and forces everyone to shuffle their hand and graveyard, so the shared graveyard, back into the library. Then you exile 10 cards from the library, and then everyone draws a new hand with 7 cards. Interestingly enough, it says up to 7 cards, so you could choose to draw less. Normally you want a full hand, obviously. And this is where you get all the resets of your hands in the graveyard, so the flashback cards go back into the library, killed Dandans go back and all the counters and draws and card draws, but also the deck gets smaller. So at some point actually it can happen that someone will deck out and the diminishing turns at some point might get exiled, and well, how do you reset the game, right? Magical Hack is another card that is 4 times in this deck list, which also as an instant for 1 blue changes the text of a permanent with 1 basic land type for another. So for example, you could change the text of Dandân from Island Home to Swamp Home and he would just die. So it's a 1 mana blue removal spell. Or you could also change 1 land into another one. Maybe you want to give yourself a red a little faster. Or remove the red from your opponent. Most important here is also the memory lapse, which allows you to counter a spell, and instead of putting it into the graveyard, you actually put it on top of the shared library. So everyone knows what's up there, and everyone will maybe try to get the card back into their hand before the enemy draws it. So this is a really important and interesting spell. I didn't have the Mirage artwork memory lapse, which I really wanted, so I still have to order those 8 copies. I do obviously own some memory lapse, but I do like 1 set, and I do like the oldest set, which is why I'm also getting the Arabian Nights Dandans. Not only because I am building an Arabian Nights set cube at some point. So even if I don't like the deck in a year, I will still keep the Dandans, since they will eventually go into the Arabian Nights set cube. But if I keep the deck, I just get the Dandans out of the way, and I probably never have to order Dandans for my set cube anymore. There's also Mindbend, which does the same, if I read that correctly, as the Magical Hack. There's only 1 copy in there, okay. And then there's Supplant Form, which costs 6, returns a creature back to its owner's hand, and creates a token copy of it. So you can instant speed remove an opponent's Dandan and create a copy of a Dandan, and now are able to, I don't know, maybe block his other Dandan and keep 1 Dandan if you have another one, or next turn attack, depending on the board state at that point. I think that is all the cards that are in the main deck. There are different deck lists online, so if you're interested in another deck list, you can just Google Dandan deck list, and you will find other deck lists. I will also put the deck list in the description, so you can just look through the deck at your own time. Now let's lastly look at the lands, which is also quite interesting before we cut off the video for today. This is Halimar Depths, which allows you to look at the top 3 cards and put them back into any order. So again, we have the top deck manipulation with this one, and it enters the battlefield tapped and gives you 1 blue. This one is in here twice. We have the Is It Boiler Works, which grants you 1 red mana and also returns a land to its owner's hand, which is important in a second. Or I will tell it now, since I don't own any Temple of Epiphany from Journey into Nyx. So this one could give you your Scryland back into your hand for you to be able to scry again, or your Halimar Depths if you want to look at the top 3 cards again. Or an Remote Isle and put it back into your hand if you already played it as a land earlier, since you can cycle this land and draw the top card of the shared library again. Lonely Sandbar does the same as the Remote Isle for just 1 blue. And then we have a whole bunch of islands. I think 22 should be in here. I chose different artworks from different sets just because I like the old border lands, and I still have to buy a couple more to get to the 22. But now I want to hear from you guys. Did you ever hear about this very interesting Dandan meme format? Is it the first time you heard about it? Would you like to build this deck at some point? There are obviously cheaper versions of Dandan to be bought. I think on Card Kingdom you could get them for around 40 bucks in its entirety, though you still have to pay for shipping, obviously. But that's how much a commander deck costs, I think. Maybe they went down to 20. But you get what I'm saying. For like 40 bucks you can buy a whole deck and play with it, and I find it still quite affordable. I'm planning on having this deck in a in about a month. Do let me know if you would find it interesting if my wife and I played a round of Dandân on camera, so you can see the deck in action. I also thought about going all in and also creating Dandân sleeves with the Dandân artwork here seen on screen, with the sleeve crafter from Dragon Shield, not a sponsor, and even create a custom Dandân playmat, but we'll have to see. One thing at a time. For now, I want to get the deck to be playable. I hope to read you in the comments. Thank you everyone for sticking around so long, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.